Welcome to the deep dive, everybody.
Excited to be here.
Today, we're going to try to tackle a figure who has been called a visionary by some and a villain by others.
Yeah.
Ashneer Grover, you probably know him from Shark Tank India, where his, I guess, sharp wit
Right.
and even sharper criticisms really made him stand out as a fan favorite.
Mm-hmm.
But, his journey from being this fintech founder to now facing some pretty serious criminal charges
Yeah.
has really left a lot of people scratching their heads wondering, is this guy a true innovator or just a master manipulator?
Yeah. It's pretty incredible. It's fascinating, really, how someone can go from celebrated entrepreneur to facing these kinds of charges seemingly overnight.
Right.
And the story of Ashneer Grover really highlights, I think, how thin that line can be between, ambition and deception.
Absolutely. So we've got a whole stack of articles here today from sources like the Economic Times, NDTV, and even a legal analysis from Lexstart Partners. And they all seem to paint a picture of a guy who was not afraid to play by his own rules.
Mm-hmm.
But did those rules ultimately lead to his downfall?
Yeah, I think to really understand this case, we need to start with, the BharatPe backstory.
Okay.
So founded in 2018, this company very quickly became a major player in India's fintech scene,
Right.
offering this, whole range of financial products for small merchants.
Interesting.
And a lot of people saw Grover's charisma and, his obvious drive as really key factors
Yeah.
in the company's really rapid rise to unicorn status.
Yeah, it seemed like he really relished this image as a disruptor, someone who wasn't afraid to kind of challenge that status quo.
Right.
But the more we dug into the story,
Yeah.
we started to see that things weren't always as, rosy as they seem from the outside.
Exactly. The cracks really started to show in January of 2022 with what a lot of people called the Kotak controversy. So a leaked audio clip surfaced where Grover allegedly threatened a Kotak Mahindra Bank employee
Really?
over missing out on Nika's IPO.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that incident really put Grover in the spotlight.
Yeah.
And I think, not in a good way.
Yeah, it definitely raised some questions.
Even though I denied that the audio was authentic,
Yeah.
raised some serious questions about his temperament
Right.
and his leadership style.
Yeah.
I mean, was this kind of the true face behind the, Shark Tank persona?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it certainly introduced, at least an element of doubt, right?
Right.
Was this, aggressive approach, was that a sign of a visionary kind of pushing the boundaries, or was it kind of a red flag
Yeah.
suggesting something a little bit darker was going on?
Right. Right.
But I think the Kotak controversy, as crazy as it was really just the tip of the iceberg.
Because as we dug a little deeper, it seems like we're starting to uncover allegations of a much larger scandal brewing.
Yeah, absolutely.
BharatPe filed both a criminal complaint and a civil lawsuit, accusing Grover, his wife, Madhuri Jane Grover, and other family members of really extensive financial fraud.
I mean, the accusations are really pretty shocking, right?
Mhm.
They essentially claim that the Grovers created, fake vendors,
Wow.
inflated invoices, and basically treated company funds like their own personal piggy bank.
This is pretty brazen.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that at this time, Madhuri Jane Grover, his wife, was the head of controls at BharatPe.
Yeah.
So she had a lot of power and
Yeah.
influence over the company's finances.
So to really get to the bottom of all of this, BharatPe brought in forensic auditors from Alvarez and Marsal.
Right.
What did they uncover?
I mean, what they uncovered was really a series of alleged schemes
Yeah.
that seemed designed to, funnel millions of rupees into the pockets of Grover and his family.
That's crazy.
Yeah, one of the most damning findings, I think, was the alleged creation of these fake HR consultancies that were linked to Madhuri Jane Grover's brother.
Oh, wow.
And these phantom companies reportedly received cores that's, tens of millions of
Yeah.
rupees
Wow.
for services they just never provided.
Wow.
And that's not all.
Oh, no.
The audit also revealed invoices for personal expenses like travel, skincare products, even electronics that were all kind of disguised as these legitimate business expenses.
So it's starting to seem like we're seeing a picture emerge here
Yeah.
of possible widespread fraud,
Mm-hmm.
potentially orchestrated by, the very people at the top of the company.
Right.
I mean, that's a pretty stark contrast to the image of this successful, disruptive entrepreneur that, Grover had cultivated.
Absolutely. And it raises a really, I think, crucial question, right?
Yeah.
Did ambition and this pursuit of success, did that kind of blind him to these ethical boundaries, or was this all part of a calculated plan from the beginning?
Right, right.
And I think to get closer to the answer, we have to consider, Grover's response to these accusations.
Yeah, because he didn't just go quietly.
No, not at all.
He vehemently denied all of these charges,
Right.
claiming the allegations were completely fabricated and part of some kind of conspiracy to oust him
Right.
from the company that he built.
Yeah, he went on the offensive. I mean, he filed his own legal actions and even an arbitration plea in Singapore, to protect his stake in BharatPe.
Interesting.
But, despite his efforts, it seems like the evidence was just mounting against him.
Yeah, and in a pretty dramatic turn of events, after a very public battle that played out in the media and his wife's termination from her position,
Right.
Grover resigned from BharatPe in February of 2022. So that kind of brings us up to speed on the major players and events in this case.
Right.
But the story, it doesn't end there, does it?
No, it definitely doesn't. I think the fallout from the BharatPe saga had, pretty significant consequences for both the company and the Indian startup ecosystem as a whole.
Right. This case became a real cautionary tale,
Yeah.
raising questions about corporate governance, ethics, and really the responsibility of investors and boards in ensuring that, ambition doesn't come at the cost of integrity.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a story that forces us to confront, these complexities of success and the blurred lines between vision and deception.
Yeah.
So stick with us as we delve a little deeper into the heart of this case and try to answer that critical question. Was Ashneer Grover a visionary who just, lost his way, or a con artist from the very start?
Yeah, let's try and find out.
I think to really understand the complexities of Grover's defense, we have to look at this concept of doglapan.
Toglapan.
Yeah, it's a term that he uses frequently in his book to
Right.
describe what he perceives as this, hypocrisy.
Interesting.
I mean, for those who aren't familiar with Hindi, doglapan basically translates to, double standards.
Okay, got it. So how does this relate to, Grover's defense in all of this?
Well, Grover basically argues that the board and the investors, who he claims were perfectly happy to benefit from, his aggressive tactics when the company was, thriving, really quickly turned against him at, the first sign of trouble.
So he's basically claiming that he was just playing the game by the rules that everyone else in the startup world follows.
Exactly, yeah. He's arguing that the very qualities that made him successful, his ruthlessness, his willingness to bend the rules, were suddenly deemed unacceptable when the spotlight turned on him.
Right.
It's a compelling argument, I think, especially in the context of, startup culture,
Yeah.
where this win-at-all-costs mentality
Right.
often prevails.
But isn't that a dangerous argument, though? I mean, if we accept that, are we essentially excusing unethical behavior in the name of disruption? Where do we draw the line between ambition and outright deception?
I mean, that's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
And it's what makes this case, so intriguing. How do we differentiate between a visionary who's kind of pushing boundaries
Right.
versus a con artist who's just exploiting loopholes?
Right.
I mean, the line can be incredibly blurry, especially in an environment like the startup world that's so fast-paced and high stakes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. Well, Grover is pointing fingers at the perceived hypocrisy of others. There are some questions about his own doglapan. One article we have here cites examples of, alleged misbehavior from Grover long before the Kotak incident even happened.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, there was an email exchange from 2020 where he apparently used, some pretty strong expletives
Wow.
with an investor from Sequoia Capital.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this pattern of aggression and pushing boundaries seems to have been present, well before these allegations of financial fraud surfaced.
Right.
So, I mean, is this just Grover being authentic and straight talking as he likes to portray himself?
Right.
Or was it a calculated strategy to, intimidate and control those around him? Was this behavior part of his success?
Yeah.
Or a sign of something more troubling?
Yeah, it's hard to say for sure. I think the way people perceive Grover's behavior really seems to depend on whether you view him as, as a visionary or a villain.
Right.
Like, if you believe in this narrative of the disruptive genius,
Yeah.
then, his outbursts might be seen as kind of, passionate, even admirable. Like, he's not afraid to speak his mind. He's not going to let anyone push him around.
Right. Right. He's a straight shooter.
Exactly. But if you see him as kind of a con artist, then those same outbursts become evidence of, his manipulative and controlling nature.
Right. So it's all about perception.
I think so, yeah. And
Yeah.
that's why I think we have to really try to go beyond these perceptions and
Right.
these narratives and look at, what does the evidence tell us? What do the facts, the fake vendors, the inflated invoices, the personal expenses masked as, business costs, what does that
Oh,
tell us?
yeah. And this is where I think the forensic audit gets really interesting
Right.
because the auditors uncovered evidence that suggests that Grover was allegedly selling tickets for cricket matches in the UAE for personal profit using BharatPe funds to purchase like luxury apartments and even exaggerating his role in making Grover's now blanket a
Wow.
unicorn.
I mean, those findings, they suggest a pattern of deception that goes beyond, just poor judgment or bending the rules, right? But it points to, I think, a much more deliberate attempt to enrich himself at the expense of the company and its investors.
So, I mean, does this mean that Grover is definitively a con artist?
Yeah.
Or is there still a possibility that he was a visionary leader
Mm-hmm.
who just made some, like, terrible mistakes? I mean,
Yeah.
is it possible for someone to be both of those things?
That's a fascinating question, and it's one that I think goes beyond just Ashneer Grover, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a question we have to ask about, a lot of powerful figures in business, politics, entertainment even.
Yeah.
Often the same qualities that drive success, ambition, charisma, a willingness to take risks.
Yeah.
Those can also be the things that lead to a disregard for rules and ethical boundaries.
And it's even more complex, I think, in the startup world, where there's this constant pressure
Right.
to grow quickly
Yeah.
and disrupt the market. It can almost foster this culture that
Mm-hmm.
tolerates or even encourages cutting corners.
Absolutely. And that's why I think it's so crucial to have, strong corporate governance, ethical guidelines, independent oversight to make sure that that ambition doesn't cross the line
I mean,
into deception.
So, I mean, we have this picture of Ashneer Grover emerging as this really complex figure, someone who had the vision and drive to build a successful company, but also might have engaged in, unethical, potentially criminal behavior.
Right.
It's a story that really seems to raise more questions than it answers.
It does, and especially since this is still, an unfolding story, the legal battles are ongoing, and, who knows, new information could come to light.
Right.
But one thing is certain, I think the case of Ashneer Grover is going to continue to be debated and analyzed for years to come.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Grover's departure from BharatPe really left the company scrambling to, rebuild their reputation.
Yeah.
But the impact of his actions really extends far beyond the company itself.
Absolutely.
So stay tuned as we kind of delve into the aftermath of this whole case and explore the wider consequences for the fintech world and the startup ecosystem as a whole.
Yeah.
So where do things stand now? What happened to BharatPe after Grover's dramatic exit?
Well, it seems like they've really been trying to move on, focusing on rebuilding their reputation and strengthening their core business. Yeah. They brought in new leadership
Right.
and implemented stricter financial controls, really hoping to, reassure investors and regain their trust.
Yeah, it sounds like they really took that clean house approach.
Yeah.
But after such a public scandal,
Yeah.
it couldn't have been easy to win back that confidence
No, absolutely not.
from investors.
You're right. The BharatPe case really had this ripple effect.
Yeah.
Throughout the entire Indian startup ecosystem, I think,
Mhm.
it really exposed this vulnerability in how investors assess startups, especially those with, these charismatic founders like Grover.
Yeah.
It really highlighted the need to look beyond the personality and the hype and really delve deeper into the financial practices of a company.
Yeah.
Due diligence became the word on everyone's lips.
Yeah, it's a classic case of trust takes years to build, seconds to break, and forever to repair.
Yeah.
And in a world like fintech
Mm.
that moves so fast, where reputation is everything,
Mhm.
I mean, that kind of damage control is a massive undertaking.
Yeah. It is.
Did they manage to recover?
I mean, they're certainly trying.
Yeah.
But I think the BharatPe case became this real cautionary tale.
Yeah.
It sparked this, I think, much needed conversation
Right.
about corporate governance and ethics in the startup world.
Right. Suddenly everyone was talking about the dangers of, unchecked growth
Yeah.
and the importance of putting in place like these ethical guardrails.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't enough to just move fast and break things anymore.
Exactly. And I think this conversation wasn't limited to India.
Right.
The BharatPe case, it really resonated globally,
Yeah.
serving as like this stark reminder
Yeah.
that responsible innovation and ethical conduct are essential no matter how disruptive or revolutionary your idea might be.
It really does bring home that point that success, especially in the tech world, can be so fleeting. Um, building a sustainable business requires more than just a brilliant idea and a charismatic leader.
Yeah.
You really do need a strong foundation of ethics and integrity.
Yeah. And it raises, I think some important questions about the role of investors and boards in all of this, too. Like,
Yeah.
are they doing enough to ensure that the companies they're backing
Yeah.
are operating ethically and transparently? Or are they just too focused on rapid growth and profitability?
Those are really crucial questions. And, I think ultimately everyone involved,
Yeah.
founders, investors, boards, they all have a responsibility to create a culture of accountability and integrity.
And it's not just about avoiding scandals or legal trouble, right?
Yeah.
It's about building businesses that are not only successful,
Yeah.
but also ethical and sustainable
Right.
in the long run, Businesses that people can trust and believe in.
So I guess what's the takeaway here for you, the listener? What can we learn from this kind of roller coaster ride through the world of fintech and the rise and fall of Ashneer Grover?
I think this case just reminds us that behind every, charismatic leader and every disruptive startup, there are like real people, real money,
Yeah.
and real consequences.
Right.
It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of, innovation and disruption,
Yeah.
but we can't lose sight of the human element in all of this.
It's a reminder to look beyond the hype,
Mhm.
to ask those tough questions
Yeah.
and demand transparency and accountability from the companies we support.
Yeah. I mean, don't be afraid to like dig a little deeper and look beyond the surface.
Yeah, absolutely.
And remember, the line between visionary and villain, it can be surprisingly thin.
It can.
Even the most brilliant ideas can be corrupted by greed and ambition.
So as for Ashneer Grover,
Race.
I mean, his story is far from over.
No, it's not.
The legal battles continue. And his future remains uncertain.
Mm-hmm.
Will he be able to rebuild his reputation? Or will he be forever remembered as, the fallen star of the Indian startup scene? I guess only time will tell.
Yeah, but one thing is certain. I think
Yeah.
his case is going to continue to be a topic of discussion and debate for years to come.
Absolutely.
And I think it serves as a powerful reminder that in this world of startups, where innovation and disruption are so celebrated,
Okay.
ethics and integrity have to be the foundation.
Well said. This deep dive has certainly given us a lot to think about.
It has.
Remember, in a world where charisma and controversy collide, it's up to each of us to stay informed, ask the right questions,
Mm-hmm.
and, demand better from the businesses and leaders we support.
Absolutely.
Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.